Hi, I'm Jen B, the Simple Mom, and I am so excited for you to join us today. We are going to be talking about motivation and what gets us motivated and what sucks away our motivation. When I walk into my kitchen, the very first thing that I see is this counter. And right now, what I'm seeing, it's like, totally great. It's clean. There's a few dishes in the sink, but it's cleared up. Everything's got its space. Here's the thing. That is not what my kitchen, that has not always been the first view that I've had. And in fact, this morning, this is what I saw. But here's the thing. There's a difference between when I walked in this morning and when maybe a couple months back, if I had walked in and seen the same sight. Because this morning, that was the side of that counter, but my entire rest of my kitchen, things were where they belonged. I have a clean counter on the other side of the kitchen. My table, everything was put away from dinner from the night before. Whereas before, honestly, if I was so exhausted and I'd leave stuff. And if I'm being totally honest, a few months ago, and for quite a long time before that, walking into this room, and looking around, I felt like a failure. I felt like I couldn't handle what I was given, which was mess, and a big part of that was me. But I took a lot of that on myself, and it affected a lot of how I felt about who I was as a person. It formed my identity, and in a lot of areas in my life, it affected just the energy that I had. My identity is a child of God. And I had stopped seeing what he saw me for. And I started seeing what the world saw. I started seeing what I thought I should be and all of this. And I have realized that God sees me as his beautiful child. And that, as I've embraced that, and honestly, I'm going to go into that in some other videos further, is really the transformation that God's made in my life in that area, and what challenges I've come up to face. But to stop seeing myself as a failure in my home, I think some of us think it's only inside of our brains, so we just need to start telling ourselves, and yes, that's true. I needed to tell myself, you're not a failure, you're a child of God, you're doing the things that you're called to do. But I also had to change things around me. I had to change I had to start doing. If I wanted to change the way that I felt in my home, I needed to change what was going on. And so, I have to get emotional. One of the biggest things about how I felt in my home as a failure was because I was so overwhelmed. And my husband, actually, he does a really good job of, he would step in, like, do the dishes here and there. He'd notice that I was overwhelmed. We have 4 kids. We just had our 4th in October. So I had my second youngest is turning 2 next week, or is turning 2 soon. And so he steps in and he helps where he would help where he needed, but it was constantly just, shuffling things around or whatever. So like I said, the kitchen is one of those places that for me, we spend so much time in this room. We eat here, we do homework here, we play games here. It's the first place that I go to most mornings. And so I would walk into our kitchen and all I would see was just stuff everywhere. And like I said, it was like I couldn't succeed. And so what that did is it took my motivation for, even if I woke up like, I'm gonna seize the day, and I would wake up and I would walk into my kitchen and I was like, oh my gosh, there is no way I can do this. And I would avoid my kitchen, and the piles, like the dishes would just pile up and the stuff on the counters would pile up and it perpetuated everything was what was going on in my kitchen. And it's so, to say that it affected me spiritually or mentally or physically, like it seems strange that a kitchen can do that, but it can. I think we need to remember that our mind, the way that we perceive things, because of where we're at, often will just it'll affect us. And so I realized, Dawn at the Minimal Mom, she talks a lot about how everything you have, all the stuff, you have to remember that you have to manage that. Anything you have to manage it. And whether you are seeing it constantly or just knowing that it's there. My cabinets were overflowing with stuff. And it was one of those where I would open up the cups and I'd have to rearrange it. And my dishes. So my husband and I, one of the things that we actually, in our premarital counseling with my youth pastor, was the pastor who married us, and he asked us, like, what is your biggest fight? Like, what is the thing that you fight about? And I was like, dishes. Like, he thinks that they belong on the counter, and I think they belong in the sink. And that partly that's just how we were raised. And my youth pastor actually brought us, as part of the ceremony, he would give out symbolic gifts and regular gifts and stuff, but he would give 3 gifts, and one of them he gave us was actually a drying rack, because our biggest fight could be a compromise in that, well, if I don't want them on the counter, that's fine, but then they can go into the drying rack instead of into the sink. Well, we actually did do that for a while, but then I got sick of having the drying rack on the counter. So anyway, our dishes, I would end up they would pile up, and I would lose so much motivation to do the dishes that they would just pile up, and they would soak. I would be like, they're soaking. I'm soaking that. And it was just excuses to not just do it. But I had lost, like I said, I would walk in and I would just lose all motivation because my kitchen would just overwhelm me. It would exhaust me, honestly. And so what I would end up doing, and this was for years, they would pile up, and then I would take them all out and I would sort them on the counters and I would get them all washed, but it would take forever. So fast forward, I have cleared, I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a tour, a kitchen tour and house tour, and I'll show you I have some before and after. Some of it I was just like, gotta get it done. And I didn't know I was going to be doing these videos, so I don't have all before and after, but I I cleared out because I realized, oh my gosh, we're not even using this, and I'm having to move it around to get things out or whatever. And I only need what we're using, number one. And could I live without this? And there was so much we could live without. So it made it that now, instead of walking in and all of my counters looking like this with dishes or whatever all piled up, so now that is the only counter that sometimes really gets piled up with the dishes. But I know, and here's, as you look at the rest of my kitchen, this is what the rest of it most of the time looks like. There's stuff that's all over it occasionally, but my kids and I and my husband, quick, let's do a quick clean. Everybody grab something. I usually give one kid the floor and one kid the counters, and well, I just give a rag to our 2-year-old and have him wipe the table off. But he also puts things away as well. But I don't have to feel like that huge amount of dishes is going to take everything out of me. Because that picture that you've seen now of my dishes before, or my sink counter before, it took me 15 minutes to get any of the dishes that need to be like rinsed out or, and get them in the dishwasher and hand wash the other stuff, and maybe another couple minutes I dried most of it just to get it put away right away, the stuff that did have to be hand washed, and get stuff put away. I no longer am drained the moment that I look at my kitchen. Whereas before, I mean, like I said, I felt like a failure. A kitchen making me feel like a failure, but it was more this. Oftentimes you'll hear people say like, oh, well, it's okay to have stuff. It's kind of like the idea that I always relate it to when people talk about money. Like, it's okay for you to have money. It is. The love of money is what the Bible talks about, to not love money and for money to have you. It's the same with stuff. When we have stuff, it's okay to have stuff. But when stuff has us, when stuff controls our environment, when stuff controls our attitudes, we let the stuff take over, that's when it's not okay. And I think this transformation and I am still on this path to just really figuring out what stuff we actually need, what we don't need. I'm still on that path, but I would say that it has been one of the most refreshing paths that I could go down. And that is talking about like I keep coming back to the fact that like, how can a kitchen ruin my day? How can a kitchen drain all of my energy and emotionally just make me feel the way that it has in the past? And yet, here's the thing. I feel like decluttering our house and decluttering this kitchen and making it so everything is manageable, because I don't have an overabundance of things to manage, it has helped with my own self-worth. It has helped with my kids and the relationship I have with them, because I have time and we can sit in our kitchen and not feel like overrun with stuff, and like we don't have to clear off stuff. I don't have to quick clean up the table from like the night before when we're eating dinner. Like all of those things, it gives us so much more time. It helps with my husband and I, and just how we are with each other. So I've been clearing out things, and so a couple weeks ago, or probably a few weeks ago now, I came home, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding, what did our kids get on the wall? Because there was like this splotch of stuff, and it's right in the same spot on our wall that like they have drawn with markers and all of that stuff. And I'm looking, and then I'm like, wait a second, there's splotches all over the walls. And I realized that I had asked my husband at first, like I was like, hey, could we paint the kitchen? Which I was like, he'll just love, because he wants to get rid of the screen. But it's also work, and we have our own business, so he's works a lot with that. But I came home and I realized, as he begins to see what work and energy I'm putting into making our home a peaceful, clutter-free home, he is much more willing, and he will initiate doing things that I might want, but I know that he's gonna have to do a lot of helping with, partly because we have 4 kids. But so he had spackled all of the holes in our walls, and then like now they're at the sand. They've been spackled. They've sanded down. I'll show you a little bit. And there's a little part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of looking at the spackled holes. But what's cool is it's reminding me that as we each grow, and as I look at myself, and I think that's a big thing, is I can't change someone else, no matter how hard I try. I can't even change my kids. I can't make them be what I want them to be. I can't make my husband be something different. I can't make him do what I want to have done. But as I am looking into making myself better and looking into what I can do, he sees that. And he also knows that, like, we know we've figured out over the last 10 plus years about like our love languages, and that's part of my love languages is acts of service. And so he knows that taking steps towards doing that to match what I've been working on doing is a way that he can show his love. So back to this idea of motivation, I think it's important that we realize that decluttering is not just about getting the stuff out to get the stuff out, but it's also about making it really truly does, it has changed relationships. It has helped with spiritually, mentally, and physically. I know for me, it's been those changes, which is just, that's where I get the motivation in the morning when I come in and I see the dishes piled up and I've still got to get the kids off to school, but I know it's only going to take me 15 minutes. I no longer am looking at my whole kitchen and seeing, whoa, let me get out of here. I'm seeing, oh, I just have to do a little bit. And I also do a little bit every day. So most of the times it doesn't get to that point where I've got stacks and stacks. We'd love for you to subscribe, Jen B, the Simple Mom, and also a thumbs up is a great compliment. Thanks.